Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. Script, I don't know. Did you get a chance to see this?
Oh God, no! I haven't seen a Transformers film in theaters since the first one. I'm like, I've just seen all of them now.
I was gonna say, I think we've seen this one already, probably. I got a hunch.
I was
But
not.
it's about a good guy who has something that the bad guys want, or vice versa. And,
chase movies. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Valiant's in a different situation because Valiant has a
10-year-old
12-year-old. Yeah, exactly. So
I will say this: you show Valiant Renegade Jr. the original Beasties or Beast Wars cartoons, whatever it was called at that point, even though the computer animation is relatively primitive by today's standards, I'm pretty sure he'll get enraptured with the actual story and then probably have second thoughts about Rise of the Beasts, because the trailer alone completely did not understand what the Predacons and the Maximals were actually trying to do.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think he has seen those. He knows the Beast War story. He loves, he digs in and he goes back and watches anything he can consume on Transformers, especially, among many other things. But we went Thursday night to a PLF screening for the previews, and he really enjoyed it. He liked it. I had my issues with it, of course. So
apparently a lot of adults did.
Yeah, it was the human characters were particularly terrible in this one. And I know that's saying a lot for a Transformers movie, but man, when I say, plank of wood, flat as a pancake, that's doing it, maybe
yeah, it's pretty bad when you're longing for the days of Shia LaBeouf. Right?
I literally was sitting in the theater.
No.
Was Shia not available? So, any case, otherwise, visually, it was a lot of fun. It didn't have the kind of scale that I had hoped for with the battle scenes, but I realized they're starting over. If you want to see my full thoughts on this, where I was running on about 3 hours of sleep, of course, at that point, I did a members-only video. And that was, I think, Thursday night, right after we got out the theater. I came home and did one. So if you remember and you haven't caught that yet, it is still available to the channel members out there. So I don't want to belabor the point. But 60 million, hey, look, you know what? Considering where the trajectory for the tracking had gone in the weeks leading up to the release of this puppy, it did a little bit better than I think people had anticipated, which is okay. Is it going to make a ton of money at the box office? No. Is it going to make any money at the box office in terms of profits? Unlikely.
There's something that really stands out to me looking out at this list, though, guys, and that is one thing that is kind of building up, because here we are just past the middle of the year, basically, or heading towards the middle of the year, and we have had very few films that have been hits. And I mean by hits, but I mean that actually have made any money. We got to go back to Megan, a couple other earlier films in the year did, but other than that, John Wick 4 struggled. Transformers is struggling. The Little Mermaid bombed. Guardians of the Galaxy is just limping towards a profit at this point. Yeah. Mario Brothers is the only movie that's done anything as far as big box office. Fast X was a big disappointment at the end of the day if you look at the box office too. None of these big movies this year have done anything.
Yeah.
And I think that, with Transformers opening to 60 million, Spider-Man was the only one that was a surprise success. But at the same time, it's not really doing great. It's doing good. But compared to what a normal Spider-Man movie would do, not close. But I get it. It's animated. It's a little bit different. I get all those things. But yeah.
But Tom, in the sense of scale, right? In the sense of scale.
Right.
When you talk about the most recent thing that Sony put out, which was Spider-Man No Come Home, right?
Exactly, yeah.
As Andre say, Spider-Man No Come Home.
Well, we got that from my Netflix. We got No Come Home.
That's it. Spider-Man No Come Home. Yeah, I remember that.
Netflix won't let me watch the No Come Home.
200 and some odd million, probably close to 250 million budget. Variety had reported that the total marketing spend, this did not include tie-ins, was some ridiculous $200 to $240 million spend by Sony, which I can totally believe. It's Spider-Man. You spend the money on that, right? Top Gun Maverick, especially after it came out and it kept doing what it was doing. I mean, the marketing budget for that, according to sources that Matt Maloney over at Puck had talked to, that was 150 plus million before it came out. And I'm sure they added to it. So when you have big movies like this, you spend the money to market them in because you have to do that. You have to get butts and seats. This movie, $100 million production budget. It's animated. The marketing spend was probably another 100 million or so at least.
It's made its money back basically.
Oh yeah, it's already.
I'm not trying to
break-even.
downplay it in the least. I'm just trying to say that we have not had any major hits this year outside of Mario Brothers and kind of a surprise hit with Spider-Man, basically. Like, are the only two you can really write home about.
Don't forget about the old Cocaine Bear. We don't want to leave that one out of the discussion.
That was a bit of a disappointment at the end of the day if you look at the box office. Yeah. Megan was the only one before that. Yeah, Scream kind of did okay.
I'm seeing The Machine has been out for 3 weekends. I had no idea it was released. And it's grossed 10 million domestically, it looks like.
That's that Mark Hamill movie, right?
Yeah. That's a comedy. Like, that is an unapologetic comedy, is my understanding. And,
hey, Paulie.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think that would probably get people to go in droves, but no, they still want those tentpole films.
They do.
Well, and they're not really going to those scripts. That's what I'm kind of getting at here is,
in comparison, they're not going across the board when you look at it.
That's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. They're very picky this year about what they're going to see.
Well, one of the odd things too is that we have some movies from 2022 which actually continue to do quite well into 23. And if you just took the amount that they made in 23 alone, they would be in the top 5. So we're talking about Puss in Boots, Avatar: The Way of Water, maybe even a little bit Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Some of those carryovers into 2023 would actually place them higher than films like even Creed 3.
Mm-hmm.
Which is another one that kind of disappointed after its big opening weekend. Again, that's my question. And I know a big point of this, not to answer my own question, is the fact that they've shrunk the streaming window, right? Most people are to the point where they know they only have to wait 35 days for most films to come on video on demand now.
But not everybody, right? And that's what's key. I mean, and some they've shrunk it, but even though they've shrunk it, and this is kind of where I want to, talk to Script about this while you're here. You've heard me talk about this before a number of times. The audience has, I'm sure. The difference between the Walt Disney Company and not everybody else, but almost everybody else. Warner Brothers is kind of in the same boat as Disney in terms of how they do this. Although I think they're a little bit more clever about it to some extent. But everybody else still has some type of third-party post-theatrical windowing system. Universal, as I've stated many times, I think has the smartest hybrid model.
Probably them and Sony.
It is unique. Well, Sony is not even a hybrid model. Sony is just, we don't have a streaming service. We have a deal with Netflix.
Well, I mean, in the sense that they give it to Netflix or Amazon, depending on if it's live action or animation, basically.
Right. That's what Universal's doing. Yeah. And I think that's what's brilliant. They have 2 massive contracts worth $1 billion plus each. So people ask.
No, actually, you're right. I think Sony's more Netflix. You're right. My bad. That was Universal.
I think all of Sony is on Netflix. So they used to have a deal with Starz. Which is why Spider-Man No Come Home wound up on Starz, because it theatrically released at the end of 21. So it came out in July of 22 on Starz. But everything from January 1st for Sony started going to Netflix, and I think it's a 5-year deal, if I'm not mistaken. But Little Mermaid, real quick on this one, it's at 414, and people think it's still going. Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah,
I get that. It's probably in a position now to where even Scotty Mendelson.
Oh no!
Okay,
oh no!
Was basically putting on his own tweet, which I responded to and I retweeted over this weekend. If you're not following me on Twitter,
I miss Scotty.
You're missing some funny stuff, things I can't do here on YouTube. But even he was, looking at, his words were an over/under of 500 million, meaning that's the marker he's using. If your Vegas betting odds is it gonna stay under 500 or will it cross 500? But if it gets over 500, it's not much. Now, I've seen some others say, 580 million to 640 million will be the final range. I can't see how that's happening. And the point is that number you're looking at, that domestic box office total of 228, right? That's only $20 million more than what Super Mario Brothers did in the first 5 days. This is the first 17 days for Little Mermaid. Secondly, that international box office was at 140 million at the end of last weekend. That means in the 7 days since then, when they updated this, and this included Japan's opening this weekend. By the way, what were the biggest box offices for Aladdin and for Beauty and the Beast? Japan, internationally, 100 million or so each. It opened to 5 million in Japan. So sorry, but $45 million for the entire week, the last 7 days, is all this movie has estimated to make the entire non-US and Canada market.
That's around like $5 million a day.
It's poo.
Yeah.
I'll tell you who looks like a genius right now is the guy who played Aladdin and came out and trashed
Masood or whatever.
projections. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then everybody piled on him. Suddenly his social media disappeared. By the way, folks, Disney probably had him do that with some sort of promise ahead. But this film's going to make half of what Aladdin made, despite movie tickets being about 25% more expensive today than they were when Aladdin came out.
And as I continue to remind folks, in addition, Ariel was as popular as Belle. They were the two biggest selling Disney princesses that ever were, of course, up until Elsa and Anna came along with Frozen.
Well, and that's why I kept bringing up the video sales, because a lot of people in their responses were saying, "Oh, well, you know, The Little Mermaid wasn't as big of a movie as Aladdin and Lion King, et cetera, et cetera." I'm like, yeah, not in the theaters at the time, because it came out in a year chock full of other movies. But if you go and look at the video sales, Little Mermaid has outsold those movies on video.
Well,
in
not
some
only
cases,
that,
2 to 1.
Yeah, no, you're right. But not only that, though, Tom, to make it very abundantly clear for folks, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King would not have existed but for The Little Mermaid being the success it was, because that was the movie that relaunched Disney. I mean, if Little Mermaid had fallen apart and hadn't done what it did, all these other movies you just mentioned may not have ever made it into production.
One more interesting fact, adjusted for inflation, this live-action remake is almost certain to come in below the original animated film, and that is with the new remake having 7 times the number of theaters in the world versus the animated film. 7 times more. 7 times more screens, 7 times more capacity. Adjusted for inflation, it still will make less.
Renegade.